Welcome to How Do They Afford That, the podcast that peeks into the financial lives of everyday Australians. I'm Michael Thompson. I'm a writer and the co-host of the Fear and Greed Business News podcast. As always, I'm joined today by Canna Campbell, financial planner, founder of Sugar Mama TV, which you will find on Instagram and podcasts and YouTube and books. It's a financial literacy platform that is slowly taking over the world, I suspect. Good morning, Canna.
Good morning, Michael. I have a very helpful saving hack for everyone this morning.
Oh.
So Dyson have this special thing called the Dyson Owner Rewards. If you have a Dyson product and you go and register it, you get 20% off your next Dyson purchase in store.
That is good. But how many Dysons are you going to be purchasing?
Well, Dysons are pretty expensive, so 20% off is quite a substantial saving. And it's not like you have to do anything. Dyson isn't regularly on sale. So
that's true.
And I feel like with Dysons, people really love their Dyson. They're very passionate about them.
And it's not just vacuums. It's the,
Air wrap. Yeah, well, air wrap, that's what it's called. It's the special hairdryer that does your hair all these different ways. And it saves you money because you, number one, can give yourself a professional blow dry, which saves you money. And number two, it uses this very clever air technology, so your hair isn't damaged as much, which means you need less haircuts. Michael's eyes are now rolling at the back of his head. And you need less expensive treatments to fix the damage that hair dryers and straighteners and all those gadgets do to, a woman's hair these days.
You have put a lot of thought into this.
Well, I went to go and examine the new air wrap because I bought mine pre-loved and it's starting to get a little old. So I thought I'll just go and see what they cost, and they're expensive. But he said, no, if you bought one before and you happen to be logged, like you happen to have it registered, you'll get 20% off immediately. And I was a bit embarrassed to say, actually, I bought mine pre-loved on Gumtree, but it was registered. I was there. I was in the system. Because I had gone and registered. All you have to do is basically 1-800 number and use the label which is on the cord and just read it to them, and then it's registered. And then there you go.
You registered your second hand.
I know, don't tell anyone.
Okay, all right, we'll keep it just between us.
Well, I'm a financial planner. I like to save money.
And
if I do decide to go and buy a Dyson, I quite like the fact that if I want to, I'll be able to upgrade my air wrap.
Yeah.
At the appropriate time, once I've saved up, at a 20% discount.
And if the original owner didn't bother to register that, then that's on them, right?
That would have been very awkward.
Imagine that. Imagine they go to claim it and it's already claimed by you and they know where you live and then it's going to be awkward. Anyway, I actually kind of like to see how that plays out. We are talking about superannuation today. We are talking about a very, very important topic. We are going to cover everything that you have ever wanted to know about super, but might have been too afraid to ask, because I can assure you one thing, I'm not too afraid to ask it. I ask some very, very, very simplistic questions. Thank you, Canna, for helping me out there. Also, this feels like there's a little bit of judgment attached to that, but
there are no silly questions, particularly when it comes to super, because it's so important.
It absolutely is. And so we're going to be covering kind of the basics, really. Everything from kind of finding out what fees you're paying through to how to make extra contributions and everything in between. I would like to think of it as your superannuation health check, which is actually, it's even more than your health check. It's even where to get started. It's the directions to the doctor to get your health check. That's how far back we're going into this. Before we do that, though, Canna, know as you are listening that everything that we talk about is always general in nature. It is never personal, investment, strategic, or product advice. It is purely for financial education purposes only.
That's right. We don't know anything about your financial situation, your goals, or your risk profile. So if you hear something that's of interest, go and make an appointment to see a financial planner.
Yeah, well said. Okay, on to superannuation. Starting at the very, very, very beginning here. How super works. So who pays it? Who pays it and how much should you be getting?
Okay, so you get 11% of your base salary goes into superannuation. It's paid by your employer, and in most cases, employers need to pay super even on your bonuses, assuming that they've been earned within normal working hours. And this 11% is actually going to go up to 11.5% in July 2024.
And then it goes up to 12% after that then as well. So
exactly.
Which has been kind of a long-term commitment, hasn't it, to increasing the amount of the percentage of your pay that is taken out of superannuation to really try and shore up the retirement of Australians.
And that's a lot of money. I mean, 10%, 11%, 11.5%, 12%. This really does add up. So we really need to be paying attention to our super and giving it that TLC that it deserves.
Okay, continuing with the basics. Who chooses your super fund? Is it a case of you just go to your employer and say, I want to go with this one? Or can they say, this is what everybody uses, this is our kind of default fund for here at this workplace, you have to go with that?
Look, most people have choice when it comes to their superannuation. So you can stick with your current superannuation if you'd like your employer to pay into that one, or you can go with their superannuation account, or you can choose a completely different one if you like.
So it is entirely up to you, though.
So much flexibility.
Okay. And it has become a lot easier now to take your own super fund with you when you move between jobs, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay, continuing then with the very basics, when can you access your superannuation? And assuming that it is in retirement, is it entirely locked away until you get there?
Pretty much, yes. So you can't access it until you retire or you reach preservation age or another condition of release. And that preservation age actually depends on when you were born. But generally speaking, for most people, it's between the ages of 55 to 60. So if you were born after July 1964, I think it is, it will be age 60 that you can access your superannuation money. But I should point out, for everyone that's listening thinking, oh, it's locked away for so long, that's like 20, 30, 40 years away. Just because it's locked away, it doesn't mean you should neglect it. It's locked away for a long-term benefit, and it is most definitely an asset base that can really flourish if you pay attention to it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I suppose using the term locked away, I almost probably shouldn't have done that when I asked you that question, because it implies that you can't touch it, and you can actually be quite involved in what happens with your superannuation. You just can't spend it.
Exactly. I say to people, your superannuation essentially is your own share portfolio. So you would pay attention to your investment portfolio. It's exactly the same. It just means you can't access the income or the capital growth yet.
Okay. If we are now looking at it, it is your money. You own it. How do you see how much you've got?
Well, you need to check your balance. So checking your superannuation is probably the first and most important step to take when it comes to taking control and starting to build a realistic, authentic sense of financial well-being in your life. So you can jump online and log into your account. You can read those good old-fashioned paper statements.
Does anyone still get paper statements, do you reckon?
Well, it depends if you've ticked the option to go paperless, or you may even be super tech savvy and have an app with your superannuation account if they have one available.
Ooh.
But the other good old-fashioned way is to pick up the phone and give them a call, which is something I'm quite partial to a phone call.
I'm seeing this theme is developing. Basically, if there is ever an opportunity for you to call someone and talk to them directly about money, you will do it.
Oh, I love it. I love asking people's opinions because you get so many valuable insights from employees, and they'll give you little sneaky bits of information and like little hacks and tips. I even do this in restaurants. It drives Tom crazy because I will ask the waiter, like, what's the most popular dish? What do people rave about the most? And Tom gets so annoyed. He's like, just order off the menu. You don't need to ask them this standard question. But then they're like, oh, you know what's really delicious right now? Everybody raves about this. And you're more likely to pick the better meal and not have food envy.
How do you then take that to your super fund, though? So you're picking up the phone, talking to the super fund and going, what's the most popular super fund?
Well, you can ask them questions like, what's the most common investment? You might even ask, like, what sort of questions do people typically ask you?
Yeah.
You can go all sorts of ways and places, and they can give you great feedback or insights. It's an open conversation.
Oh, okay. Now, the easiest way to do it would probably be to, pick up the phone, jump online or download an app and just monitor, really.
Well, you want to read it first. So read it from the very top. And it's the funny thing is when people show me their statements, they kind of go to the back page first, which I find really weird. And then they're wondering why they're so confused. Read it like you would read a bank statement. Look at the top and then work through all the different sections, because it's actually quite easy to read a statement because they break it up. It's all in black and white. It's very transparent. And you can actually see what you started with at the beginning of the period and obviously what you ended, just like a bank statement. But there is actually so much valuable information for you to gain by looking through your statement and taking your time and not doing what a lot of people do, is literally go to the back page and then wonder why they're confused. Do you go to the back page?
There's a very good chance I go to the back page. As you're saying this, I'm like, yeah, what's wrong with that? Yeah, just go to the back page and see what the balance is.
The bottom line is, yeah.
Absolutely. And noted, I'm now going to read it more comprehensively from top to bottom. Can I just quickly flip to the back page and then come back to the top?
All right, okay,
thank
fine.
You. All right, thank you. Okay, so now we are accessing our super fund. We know how to get in and check our balance and to kind of check how it has performed over that period, and we know to read from top to bottom. That all makes sense. What else can you find out when you are in there? And really, I suppose I'm getting towards the investment kind of selection. How do you actually then find out kind of where your money that you have within your super fund, where is it going and how is it invested?
Well, that will be detailed on that statement that you read from top to bottom, taking it slow and steady. Now, this is where the issues come in that everyone should really be paying attention to right now and picking up that phone and speaking to their superannuation account provider. But if you haven't selected where you want your superannuation money to be invested, it is most likely that you have ended up in the default balanced investment choice, or if the superannuation provider has this, a default age-based one. Now, this age-based one is where young members typically get put in a growth or a high growth investment option, and someone, say, in their 50s will be put into a more conservative investment asset class. However, the other option, as I just mentioned, is if they haven't heard from you and you haven't intentionally selected your investments, they may have just put you into the default balanced one.
Okay. And when we talk about a balanced investment option, what does that actually mean? Is the money kind of going towards, typically might be going partly towards, say, shares, partly towards property, partly towards international shares, maybe a portion of it held in cash as well? Does this sound like I have read my statements at some point?
It does. It is, as it says, it's a little bit of everything. So you've got a little bit of property, a little bit of shares, a little bit of international shares, some cash and fixed interest. So it is a, I guess, have your fingers in all the different pies option.
Okay.
But it isn't necessarily the right option for everyone. You really need to know what your risk profile is and then make sure your superannuation is invested in alignment to that risk profile. And I should also point out, different superannuation account providers have different asset classes they would use for the different risk profiles. So, for example, superannuation fund XYZ would have a certain split of assets for a balanced profile, and then super fund ABC has a different percentage-based system as their definition. So it can vary.
And these are the decisions made behind the scenes at these super funds by the people who manage the investments, who are all very well kind of qualified and very well credentialed to be doing this, but it is open to kind of interpretation across super funds as to what they believe is an appropriate balanced fund.
Exactly. And they're all within reason, but that is why it's so important that you do a risk profile, because you might do a risk profile and come out as being, say, a high growth investor, but then you discover that your current superannuation account's high growth asset allocation isn't quite at the same structure and percentages to what you would like.
How do you do your risk profile? We have actually covered a full episode on risk profiles, but just for the benefit of kind of keeping everything together in today's episode, how would you do your risk profile?
You could literally just Google risk profile questionnaires online. However, my favorite one is on the International Vanguard website. It's about 12 questions, and they are really easy to understand. You do it all online, and literally within a minute, it spits out a suggested asset allocation for you to use as a guide. But then you can take that and look at all the various options that are available through your superannuation account to make sure that you are investing correctly and what is appropriate for your goals and dreams and the deadlines for those goals and dreams.
Okay, so say you've done that and you now have an idea of what your risk profile is, and it might be different to what your super fund has put you in, perhaps by default or by what you had chosen previously. Can you change it within your super fund? Should you change it? And how do you change it? 3 questions in one.
Thanks, Michael.
Anytime.
All right. So, yes, you can change it. And yes, you should change it. This is your money. This is your investment portfolio that's essentially just locked away for your future financial well-being. So, yes.
This feels like at the point at which it might be good to get some professional advice.
Exactly.
And you can actually get that. That is available as well through super funds.
Correct. A lot of them provide general advice, and it's actually incredibly helpful because not only can they talk you through the different options that are available, they can also help you with those like funny little admin questions where you don't know how to do something or you just want to check that you're doing it correctly so that you don't waste any time. But absolutely, it's there to help make life a lot easier for you. And normally when it's general advice, it is free.
And you can have one of those very open conversations like you were talking about earlier, where you can just ask them a whole bunch of questions about where the money is going and what people are ordering for dinner and all that kind of thing.
You can pick their brain, but they can help you make sure that you fill out that form correctly, that you allocate the money that's in alignment to what your risk profile it is. And obviously it's a general advice, it's not personal advice, but this is a way of making sure that your superannuation money is invested correctly against your risk profile. But also it's the start of a very important and powerful financial journey in building your own financial literacy. Is
there a general kind of rule of thumb around risk profiles and the asset allocation? Because I'm going to make a broad assumption is that kind of the younger you are, the more risk you can potentially afford to take because you have time.
I'm so glad you asked this question. Yes. Generally speaking, the younger you are, you've got the benefit of time so you can see the markets through all the volatility. And if you look at the markets over the last, say, 20, 30, 40 years, you can see the trend line. So the younger that you are, the more opportunities you potentially open yourself up to lean against a growth or a high growth risk profile. And for someone who is approaching retirement, perhaps they don't feel comfortable seeing their superannuation account balance fluctuate so much. It would potentially be more appropriate for them to have more of a balanced risk profile. But you must do your risk profile because even some young people are very conservative with money. They're new. They're only dipping their toes into the water right now. And so they do have a naturally very conservative, risk-averse risk profile, which is perfectly normal. But maybe in a year or two's time when they've got more experience, and this is why I recommend everyone checks their risk profile at least every 2 years. When you get a bit of, financial literacy under your belt, you go, actually, I'm now ready to change my risk profile and have more international shares or more Australian shares or more property in my portfolio, and vice versa as you're getting closer and closer to retirement.
When I asked you that triple-barreled question before, the should you, can you, and how do you change it, did we address the how do you change it? How do you is this something that you do on the phone then, or do you need to, is there an online form or do it via the app? I don't know.
You normally need to sign off on it. So it's normally a form that you would download and you would have to make sure that it obviously adds up correctly, and you have to select the products that are available to your superannuation account. And that is why maybe making that phone call can sometimes be quite comforting, because you can say, look, can I just check I'm completing this correctly and submit it online to them. So yes, it is literally a form. Sometimes it can be done electronically. Sometimes you need to print it off and send it off. It depends on the superannuation account provider.
I'm learning a lot today.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh dear. Yes.
I kind of backed you in a corner.
Yeah.
Have you made sure your superannuation money is invested in alignment to your risk profile? You are looking so guilty and I am so angry. How long have we been doing this together? It's probably the most important thing
to
do. It is, as I said, it's one of the most important first steps you take when it comes to fixing your finances. okay, I'm going to get angry now. Like, superannuation is most likely going to be the biggest or one of the biggest financial assets that you may ever own. It's also a very tax-effective environment to hold assets as well, for the long run, obviously being aware of all the limitations and rules and regulations. But that is your hard-earned precious money. Like, you've got to pay attention to it. What gets monitored gets made.
Okay. Well,
I'm so angry.
I'm just going to step out for a moment and just going to go and quickly do a risk profile and make a couple of quick calls. And we'll be back in a moment because there is a lot more we need to cover.
Oh, my God, Michael. Are you serious?
I'm serious.
I mean, everything we've talked about.
I know.
Oh, my God.
Canna, we are talking about superannuation today. It is all about the grand superannuation health check. And look, we took a little bit of a break there and you had a bit of a cup of tea and
A cry.
I'm
broken right now.
Realising that the last year of doing this podcast with me has taught me a lot. I just have not implemented as much as I need to.
This is why you need to see a financial planner, because you are busy. You are time poor. You need to outsource and delegate to an expert.
Yeah, I'm time poor and rapidly becoming money poor because of my poor decisions. Anyway, this is going to teach me how to manage my superannuation, because we have talked about some of the basics, kind of checking your balance and kind of finding out where your money is actually going. One very important thing that we didn't talk about before is finding out your fees, how much you're actually paying, what you're paying for, and how this kind of compares. How do you check your fees? Oh, wait a sec. Can I answer this? You
better get it right, otherwise I'm going to be really cranky.
Is it in the statement?
Congratulations.
The statement that you read from top to bottom?
That is correct.
Okay. And is it a clear kind of breakdown?
No, it's not. I'm going to be fair. It is. Reading the fees is confusing and it's very hard to compare, which I think a lot of people don't realise, and then they get confused and overwhelmed, because the way fees are charged really do vary from superannuation account to superannuation account. Some are an admin fee, some are an account keeping fee, some are dollar-based, some are percentage-based. Then discounts kick in at certain account balances. It is, I think, quite hard to really compare, apples on apples, because they're just simply not. And this is why getting advice is so important, because one product may cost a little bit more, but it actually might be far more appropriate for that person than, say, the cheapest one out there. Okay,
so it is not just a case of looking for the cheapest kind of fees. It is finding the right product for you.
Finding the right quality and value for money. Because there are lots of bells and whistles that can be added to superannuation accounts, which can make those fees blow out. And sometimes you need some of those account features, but sometimes you don't. So you don't want to be paying for something you don't need or want or add value to your situation.
And do they typically appear as monthly fees on your statement?
It depends what the fee is. So whether it's an administration fee or if it's brokerage, it's only anytime you buy shares in your superannuation account.
Okay, so you can find out your fees, you can see what you are paying, and you can then, it's probably a good opportunity to have one of those conversations with your super fund, and particularly if they're able to offer kind of advice within the fund and kind of unpack and actually find out what those fees mean. Because if it's not clear on your statement, you're able to ask for a more detailed explanation, can't you?
Absolutely. And I have seen situations and been in situations with people where they were paying for a particular product feature, but they weren't actually using it. And by us having a conversation with the product provider, we were able to remove it from their account and their fees came down quite significantly. So this is why it's worth jumping on the phone, asking those questions. Remember, there are no stupid questions, and really seeing what you're paying for and is it worth it, just like you would do when you're doing your budget.
Another thing that you would be checking for when you are looking at your statement, and also you don't just have to wait for your statement to kind of come out and to check that. You can check your account at any point, can't you? You can just jump on, just like you would be checking your bank account.
Correct.
Okay, good. I wanted to clear that one up. That you'd also be checking to make sure that your payments are going in on time. So if your employer is paying your superannuation, you want to be checking that you are getting it when you are supposed to and the right amount. How do you know? Is that a case of comparing it with your pay slip?
You can do that, but you can look at the transactions, and the ATO say that employers must pay it quarterly, and they obviously have to pay the right amount. And if it's incorrect, there's some very serious penalties for your employer. But I had a situation with a girlfriend, and her employer was never paying her superannuation, and she got robbed of $30,000 in superannuation because she never checked it.
And I know there is a big crackdown on underpayment, and a lot of it is not necessarily deliberate by employers. It can be quite a confusing system for different payments to be made, but it is your money and you are entitled to it, and you need to make sure that it is being paid. But it's also a bit of a misconception that your superannuation is paid at the same time as your pay. That you kind of think that because you're getting paid weekly or fortnightly, that at the same time that your pay lands in your bank account, that portion of your superannuation that is essentially still a portion of your pay would be going into your super fund. But it's not. It might be quarterly.
They have to do it as a minimum on a quarterly basis.
Okay. That is actually something I don't reckon that is as widely known as you would like it to be. I reckon that is a misconception. I'm calling it. That is my top misconception for today.
You are really trying to make good again your stuff up. I mean, you could have just lied to me to make me feel better about myself. All my wise words.
No, I will never lie on this podcast. I have always told you the truth. I have told you some very embarrassing truths about my financial situation and my 26 bank accounts and all of these kind of various things, knowing that the judgment will rain down upon me.
We need to do a Michael Money makeover series.
I reckon that would be both horrendously embarrassing and also quite entertaining, because I reckon there would be some little surprises in there that you may never have seen before, and you will go, how on earth did you do this? And I will tell you, honestly, I don't know.
But can you imagine all the great things I can show you what to do, and how great you're going to feel and in control, and have just a really clear understanding about your finances and understand where you're going in life financially?
It actually does sound quite exciting.
Let us know what you think. Should we do this?
Oh, goodness me, because it feels like this is a
You're
dangerous...
You're a bit terrified, to be
I'm
honest.
a little bit terrified because it is a mess. It is a mess back there, and this could be the one scenario that you just go, I can't, I'm sorry, I can't fix this.
Mama Mia did call me the money whisperer, so I am not afraid of a challenge.
Oh, this is a challenge. Okay, back to superannuation. Insurance. We've talked about insurance a lot on this podcast, and one of the things that you have mentioned repeatedly is be aware of what insurances you have within your super fund. So what does it typically look like? What different kind of policies might you have in there, and kind of how do you pay that? Is that kind of fees that are coming out all the time? Is it a lump sum? Basically, explain it all, please.
All right. Looking at your superannuation and understanding what you're paying for is incredibly important. It's probably the second thing you would do after checking where your money is invested within super. So there are typically 3 types of insurance that are possibly within your superannuation account. The first one is life cover. So that pays a lump sum if you were to die. The second one is TPD cover, total and permanent disablement. And then the third one is income protection. Now, income protection is not necessarily available with all superannuation accounts, so it may or may not be there. And the way that these insurance premiums are paid are by monthly premiums. Okay. And so it comes out of your superannuation account. So for some people, they may not need insurance because of their situation. They're flush with cash and have no debt and no responsibility. So for them to know what they're paying for could help them save some money. And obviously, the more money you're saving within your super, the more money it is exposed to the wonderful world of compounding interest over the long run. However, you might look at this and go, oh my goodness, I don't have enough cover, or I need a different type of cover. So this is really important that you pay attention. Again, this is where this general advice 1-800 numbers where you can call your superannuation account provider can come in really handy, because those consultants can give you an idea or a guide just to help work out what is the right type of cover that you need and the costs and so forth.
How do you then change it? If you want to remove some of that insurance, or if you decide I actually do need some more cover, how do you bump that up or remove it?
It's actually quite easy. But again, it depends on how much cover you're increasing it by. A lot of superannuation account providers have a cap as to how much, life and TPD cover. But you typically need to go through an underwriting process depending on the level of cover. However, depending on the superannuation account providers, they do have automatic acceptance levels, whether you fit into that category or not, where you don't have to necessarily go through as an extensive underwriting process. And I will say, insurance through superannuation can be quite economical because you quite often access group discounts, so the premiums can be more cost effective. And this is a really important thing here. The premiums are then paid out of superannuation. So if you are a young family that is on a really tight budget and you need, for example, income protection or you need life cover, but the budget can't afford it right now, but you feel stressed and anxious about being exposed and who would look after your family and your kids, it is a way of actually affording the premiums because it's paid from your superannuation account. Keeping in mind, obviously, that has an eroding effect on the balance, but it is a way of, to a certain degree, helping safeguard your financial well-being.
I feel like I've just had one of those light bulb moments where I hadn't necessarily considered it from a particular perspective.
Right. So Michael's money makeover, the first thing we're doing is fixing your super by doing a risk profile and making sure that money is invested correctly. The second thing we're going to do is have a little deep dive into your insurances.
Well, that won't take
long. But not
long.
before putting you on the biggest loser with your bank accounts and those savings accounts. And, oh, my God, there is so much work to be done here.
What would the target be? We've got 26 accounts at the moment across 4 banks. What's the target? Would it be like 15, 16?
Oh, no. I will go easy on you. I'm going to give you is it a quota or a tariff of tariff, I think is the right technical term? Tariff. I'm giving you a generous tariff of 10.
10 accounts?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I'm being very generous here.
Okay. All right. This sounds like it's going to be really tough and really hard, but it feels like something that needs to happen. Can we talk about additional contributions? Because this is, again, one of those things where I understand the principle behind it, but it's a little bit, how do you actually then implement it? What are the circumstances when you might make an additional contribution to your super fund?
There are lots of different opportunities and occasions. So you might be salary sacrificing. You might be doing the co-contribution scheme. So again, it will really depend on the administration of your superannuation account provider because they have various biller codes for different types of contributions. And you want to make sure that you use the right biller code and, of course, the right reference number so that goes into your account that accurately reflects the type of contribution you're making because you might be making a tax-deductible contribution, particularly for someone who's self-employed. You need to make sure it's going through the right biller code to make sure it's correct. So you do have to exercise some caution there.
Okay, and when you're talking about the different tax concessions, that's probably a trigger to get some advice.
Very much so, because there are caps and limits as to how much you can actually put into superannuation, and they are per financial year, not calendar year, which a lot of people make mistakes. And then, of course, if you've gone over that cap, there are penalties. And it loses its tax effectiveness for some people, depending on how much they breach that cap by.
Okay, next one. And the next question is a big one because there's been a lot of talk in recent years about multiple superannuation funds, about people having more than one super fund, and this effort really to reunite people as well with their lost super. So why would people actually have more than one super fund?
You know, it's actually so easily done. We move houses, we change email addresses, we may only work with an employer for a short period of time, we may have gone overseas for an extended period. We just let our life admin fall to the bottom of our list, so it's very easily done. And in fact, ASIC have over $1.4 billion sitting in unclaimed money. And some of that could be superannuation money. So you are not alone if you've lost some money, and that's why everyone should really do a quick check.
Okay, how do you do that check?
Really easy. So you can go through MyGov. You can also go through MoneySmart. If you type in unclaimed money, you can go through the ATO, or how handy, I'm so organised today, you can ring the ATO's Lost Super hotline on 1300 2865.
Okay. What about then combining? Say you have multiple super funds, and it might not necessarily be a lost super fund. You might know exactly where it is.
Where all 17 are, yeah.
That feels very pointed. Feels like it's slightly directed towards me. But you might know exactly where they are. Do you combine them into one?
You can,
Okay.
but not necessarily dive straight in and do it, because there are consequences that you need to be aware of before you do this. So the first one is, which is the biggest one, and that is insurance. Because if you roll and consolidate your superannuation accounts, that will mean the ones that you're rolling out of, you will potentially lose your insurances. So you will potentially lose that life cover, that TPD cover, that income protection, and you may not necessarily have it through your, I guess, base camp superannuation, which is where you're consolidating it all in. So be very, very careful, and you would never want to be in a situation where you're not insured, so you would always go and apply for that new cover and then go and cancel the old cover once it has been approved and accepted and you have that in writing. So that's the most important thing to consider. The other thing is fees. As I said, it's really hard to work out the difference between superannuation accounts, and comparison websites are very, very handy, but you need to look at what you're paying for and whether you want that or not and whether it's worthwhile. And then the other big thing, and no one talks about this and it really worries me, and that is when you're changing your superannuation accounts, have a quick look and see who your nominated death benefit is, because I've worked with so many people and they're like, oh my God, that's my ex-wife from 15 years ago. Or, oh God, no, I've had a big falling out with, my family member. She's not getting a dollar of my hard-earned money. So have a look at who you have nominated as your, the death benefit nomination, which is really important, and whether it's binding or non-binding. And then there are other little things you need to think about. I don't want to overwhelm everyone, but like time out of the market, because obviously there's an administration process in selling everything down, rolling it across. There might be some opportunities missed, or you might actually be able to buy into a better market. And there's buy-sell spreads. Like there's so much to consider, but the really big ones you need to be aware of is insurance, fees, and of course who you've nominated as your death benefit.
Okay. The other one.
That was a lot to unpack. Sorry, I get a little passionate.
No, I was
I've
actually.
got heart palpitations. I feel like I've just run a marathon. I feel alive when I talk about super.
You're a very unique individual. You know that, right?
Poor Tom, mate. Yeah. No, I'll take that. I've heard that a few times.
It's a good thing. It is a good thing. Unless, like me, during that episode, you kind of came under fire for having made some poor decisions, or more so, not having made decisions in the past and just letting things drift, which is kind of one of the take-home messages. Don't let things drift. Just kind of pay attention to your superannuation, get involved because it's your money. All right, I'm going to do the fastest summary of what we have covered. I'm going to do this in 30 seconds or less.
Go.
Oh, God, I wasn't ready. Okay, can we start it now? Go. Still wasn't quite ready, but I'm ready now. Go. It is really all about superannuation health check. It is the basics of superannuation, the things that you actually need to know just to get started, to be able to take an active role in your super, because it's your money. It is money that your employer should be paying you, and they must pay you by law. And you need to be checking your superannuation balance, checking your pay slips to make sure it is actually going into your account. You can choose which super fund you want to use. Your employer can't dictate that to you. Your money is locked away only to the extent that you can't access it to spend it until retirement or under certain circumstances. The fact is that you do have a say over how your money is invested while it is in your superannuation, and you need to get involved in it because it is your money and it pays to actually be a little bit invested in the process. Start by checking your balance and actually being aware of how much money you have. Jump online, check your statement, and read your statement from top to bottom. And that will also tell you a lot about what fees you are paying as well. It should tell you what your investment selection is, and then check to make sure that matches your risk profile. That your risk profile is something that is very much customized, specialized for you, that it is based on kind of where you're at in your life and what appetite you have for risk in your investments. And you should really make sure that where your money is going within your superannuation matches that risk profile, and get some advice. And there is advice available within your super fund as well, should you wish to kind of talk about the various options that are available to you. Check your statements so that you can find out what fees you are paying and see what they are covering as well. Again, pick up the phone and ask the questions if you're not sure about any of this. Check those payments are going in on time, and have a look at what insurances you are paying, what's covered, what flexibility you have within that, and basically what you can change. Remember that it is customizable based on what you need for your circumstances and your lifestyle. You can make additional contributions. Great time to get some professional advice before you do any of that, because there are different kind of tax concessions and different caps and different rules and things that do apply to that. So it does make sense to get some advice. Multiple super funds. There are a lot of people that have more than one super fund, whether it's because they've been working in different jobs or they've moved overseas or moved around, and you can track them down. I think it was the ATO Lost Super Hotline. I jotted it down when you mentioned it, 13 28 65. And when you are combining or looking at combining multiple super funds, there are a lot of things to consider. The impact on that insurance, the fees and the potential savings that you could be making on those fees, but also some of the tax things that could be triggered as well by moving money from one to another. Again, a good opportunity, good time to get some professional advice. Was that 30 seconds, Canna?
God, no. I fell asleep towards the end, Jodie, because I'm so wiped out from my the emotional roller coaster of this episode with you. I feel like I need a little bit of a nap.
I'm glad you were able to take that nap while I was talking. That's a great compliment. Look, if anybody wants more information from you, Canna, and which doesn't come with kind of judgment, not like it has for me today, how do we find you?
The best place to get in contact with me directly is through Instagram at SugarMamaTV.
And you can hear me every day with Sean Aylmer on Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. Thank you very much for listening to really what became a bit of a bumper episode of How Do They Afford That today. Remember to hit follow on the podcast. Please leave us a review as well. Next week, we are talking about a different part of superannuation. I think you've got the superannuation bug right now, haven't you? And you're just kind of itching to talk about it a little bit more. A different angle, though. We are looking at retirement, but this is not just for people who are already retired or are about to retire. This is something that everyone of every age should be considering and should be hearing, so don't miss it.